Hi, welcome to this edition of Business Matters. We've got something a bit different today. We're actually filming in Spirit of the Rock Gin Distillery, which is run by Peter Millhouse, and we're going to learn about Peter's journey of introducing his own gin to Gibraltar. Hi Peter, thanks very much for joining us on this edition of Business Matters.
Okay, well thanks for having me, yeah. Welcome to Spirit of the Rock, George's Lane.
Thank you very much, and it's a very interesting story, isn't it? You retrained to create this new project of yours.
Yeah, well, like all good men, I obey my wife. And she had this brilliant idea quite a few years back, walking back from Europa Point to the town on a Saturday morning, having watched Saturday Kitchen, where they were talking about craft gin, and she saw this old sign of Glenrocket Distillery, and she had that light bulb moment going, a distillery? Nobody makes anything in Gibraltar. So she ran back, told me about it. I said it was brilliant. And from that point on, we had to keep quiet for a couple of years because it was a very good idea and didn't want it to get spoiled. And so, yeah, I retrained, went to London, worked with a master distiller, and he helped us create the blend, which took a couple of years, which is now Campion. Which is
And what's the story behind Campion then?
Well, Campion, we found out, was a flower that was extinct. And so when Gibraltar chose its national flower, they chose the candy tuft.
Right. Because
that was around. That's got a great name because it's, I'm trying to think, what is it? Gibraltar Rica is its Latin thing, so that's a great name. But the Campion came back in 1994, so it wasn't chosen as the national flower, but it now is a flower that it doesn't grow anywhere else in the world. So it is completely unique to Gibraltar.
Wonderful.
So it's called Silene tomentosa, which is, and it's still difficult to find, and luckily the Alameda Gardens and Kew Gardens have been growing it. So we managed to get some small plants, and we cultivated a few and collected a few flowers and seeds. So we add a few to every batch, basically, to give it some provenance.
So your gin is truly infused by Gibraltar.
Yeah, that's right. It is the spirit of the rock.
Very good, very good. Well, you were kind enough to give us a little tour earlier. It's really interesting. You do some tasting here. I managed to avoid the tasting, but had a smell. It's a very pungent gin, one to enjoy and not to gulp.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of gins are actually made to be mixed with lots of things, but actually we thought, well, respecting Gibraltar's naval heritage and the fact that the first troops that took it, the Dutch and the British, well, it was a grand alliance actually with a German boss in charge, Prince George of Darmstadt, and we're in George's Lane, so actually he was the first governor of Gibraltar. They were drinking Dutch courage when they landed, so it seemed a really natural fit to try and respect that and make a very strong, so it's 48% ABV, which is a lot stronger than most gins. If you go more than that, if you go up to Navy strength, which is 57% ABV, you actually can't taste anything, it's just alcohol. Right. So if you like, when somebody said, why did you do 48%, I said, well, anymore it doesn't work, so we cranked it up as far as we could.
Very good, very good. And I wonder, I mean, that there's so much history surrounding gin. I wonder if you could give us a little nutshell history.
Yeah, well, when we do the tour, what we try and do is we sort of do a timeline, and back in 1055, so even before the Battle of Hastings, Italian monks were infusing alcohol with juniper berries because juniper at that time was a source of vitamin C. If you didn't have lemons and oranges, it's actually rich in vitamin C. And it was thought to be pretty good for you, so it was more of a medicine back then. So the guests on our tour, they get to try some what we call just juniper. And that's really, yeah, it's one of those things that gives us a start point, because the meaning of gin is, if you look at the definition, is predominantly juniper. Right. And there's lots of modern gins now that are not predominantly juniper. They're called New Western dry gins. So we wanted to make a London dry gin, which basically means it has to be made on a still like ours, Athena, and you're then not allowed to mess with it. Whereas if you do a New Western dry gin, you can more or less construct it how you like and add things and whatever to try and get it. I suppose the downside, if you like, is that when you do, like we do small runs of maybe 100 bottles, each run is going to be perhaps slightly different. we try very hard. We measure everything to the gram. We try and be very consistent, but you never know. It's a bit like cooking. You never know how it exactly turns out. But the great news is everyone who's tried all of our batches, and we've done 21 batches now, they love them all. So, yeah.
Well, I have to say, it smelt very good, and I look forward to a taste when the time's right.
Yeah, it's a bit early.
Yeah, exactly. So, gin, the gin market is very crowded. You know, there's probably a global craze for gin. You know, what stands out for you? What makes you stand out from the rest? And is there any other competition in Gibraltar?
Yeah, I mean, well, what makes us stand out? I mean, our blend is pretty amazing. So a lot of gins, when they're launched, it's more about the marketing and the bottle and what it looks like. So there's been a predominance of pink gins and things that look pretty. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a sweetened gin. So lots of gin that's made in Spain is actually add sugar. So you couldn't call it a London dry gin because it's too sweet. But we don't think that's bad. I mean, everyone's taste is different. Ours is very much for the people who really like gin because it's a pretty serious gin at 48% ABV. It's got sweet orange and lemongrass are the citrus notes and some lovely spices. And the magic ingredient, actually, that nobody's ever added before is we've got some carob pods which grow in Alameda Gardens, which is like a false chocolate. And that gives it, we would call it a mouthfeel, which makes it very smooth, so you can sip it like a whiskey. So that makes it very different. It's a sipping whiskey. But it also works if you do add the tonic, or you could add soda water. It's generally always served with a slice of something that's either an orange or a mandarin or a tangerine, something on that scale. Because when you mix a gin, you've got to try and complement the notes that are in the music, if you like, so what's in the thing. If you throw something in that's from somewhere else, you sort of go, oh, that's a bit funny.
Right, okay. And I think it's worth the viewers knowing that everything, from start to finish, you do everything.
Yeah, we do the whole thing, all by hand as well. So it's a very small scale operation. A small batch for us is around 100 bottles, whereas a small batch for Hendrix is 1 million bottles. So it's a very different animal.
But it's about the experience and a bit of TLC along the way.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a craft gin, and I think that's probably in the crowded market you were talking about. It's crowded with some of the big players who've been around forever. Gordon's and Tanqueray, and they are set up and their prices are very competitive because they're fighting each other. But we're much more in a premium market. So in the UK, a bottle of our gin would probably sell for £60, whereas here it's under 30.
Right.
Because craft gins that are that good demand a really premium price. So it's not really something to compare with something you could buy for maybe under £10.
Right, that's really interesting. I hadn't realised that.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, you sell all your gin locally. It's not exported at the moment.
It's not exported at the moment because we're, like most small businesses, the problem we would have if we imported it into the UK, we'd have to pay about £10 tax per bottle to the government when it landed. So if we imported a serious amount, they'd ask us for £16,000 up front before we sold a bottle. So we're a small family company, we're self-funded. So yeah, down the road with a little bit of profit, we will definitely be exporting. But that
was going to be the next question.
Yeah.
Aspirations.
Yeah, we want to get it around the world. And right from the beginning, Stella, my wife, and I, we've had this idea of premiumizing Gibraltar to try and add value, to offer something really nice that represents Gibraltar. And we have the idea that in the future, perhaps with the government's backing, we would get a gin festival in Gibraltar where all the craft gins of the world would come here and we'd have a competition.
That's a great idea.
To see which is the best gin in the world.
Yeah, I hope that comes to fruition. So, and you do tours and tastings. So how do people find out about you?
Well, if they go to spiritoftherock.gi, they'll find a link there, or they can go to Buy Tickets Gibraltar, and they can buy tickets there for our tours, which we run almost daily, not every day, because we are a factory. And they're usually at the end of the day because it's got to be gin o'clock.
Sure.
Because our tours, although they involve the history, we explain the history, as we were saying, right from 1055 up to the present day. There are different tastings of gin as you go along, which match the little video show we do of the history of Gibraltar. And it's usually £20 a head, but if there are local groups in Gibraltar, we've had quite a lot of interest from local groups. They bring their workmates after work.
I was going to ask
Corporate things, we've done a lot of those, and everyone has a really great time.
I'll certainly be floating it in the office when I get back.
Yeah.
The idea.
So it's a real fun way to end the day. And anyone who comes on the tour, we give them a double tot of Campion gin or any of the gins they've tried. They can actually, so we have had people taking away the just Juniper from 1055 because they thought it was amazing.
Excellent, excellent. So if somebody wants to buy a bottle, other than coming and knocking on the door, where else can they buy it?
Well, most of the good shops, basically. So we're distributed through Anglo-Hispano, and Saucony and Speed have it in their shop in the cellar in Irish Town. So Viniopolis, Ramson's have it, Eroski. It's at the duty free. If you're going with hand baggage, basically you must take a bottle with you. You've got to take the spirit with you when you leave the rock. And yeah, even the cruise liner terminal, it's there. So when people come visiting.
Brilliant. Well, it's been really interesting, Peter, and I wish you all the very best of success. And I very much look forward to tasting the gin. So
Yeah.
I'll be keeping a close eye and hopefully be back soon.
Yeah, well, you're always welcome. The door's open. Well, except when we're brewing, then it's closed. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much.
Well, thanks very much, Peter. It's brilliant to hear about your story, and I'll certainly be back to the distillery myself. But in the meantime, since having my smell of gin, I'm now going to have a taste.